My dear brothers and sisters, in my first sermon, I was talking about the significance of maw'idha, admonishment, or nice preaching, as the Quran calls it. Islam emphasizes the role of maw'idha, admonishment in our life. That each one of us, no matter how strong we are in our faith, how knowledgeable we could be, we all need some kind of admonishment once in a while. Some preaching. Some people don't like to preach to. They immediately tell you, I don't want to hear this preaching. They don't like any person preaching to them. In fact, we all need some kind of a preaching once in a while. Because in the end, no matter what, our hearts often deviate from the right path, and we need someone somehow to put us back on the track. And that is the role of maw'idha. That is the role of the preaching and admonishment. However, my dear brothers and sisters, there are two types of preaching. One type is verbal, that you hear from someone. Someone preaching, someone is preaching. It's a good thing that once in a while you listen to someone preaching, because we need that preaching, that admonishment. But sometimes the preaching and the admonishment is not verbal. It could be a non-verbal admonishment, a non-verbal lesson. Let me give you some examples. The Prophet ﷺ says, كفى بالموت واعظة وأبلغ العظات الاعتبار بمصارع الأموات. He says, one of the admonishment, and maybe the most effective admonishment to us, is to see other people dying. Death can be a great admonishment for us. When we take a fellow Muslim to the cemetery, when we bury them, when we see them being buried in their hall, that's a stark admonishment for me, to me. I'm the living one. I don't need someone to teach me or to preach me. By seeing someone being buried and taken away from this materialistic life, that could be a great lesson, a great preaching to me. In fact, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, just before his death, he says, Amma qareeb, soon, when I die, سيعظكم خفوت صوتي وسكون أطرافي. He says, all my life I have been preaching to you, giving you so many maw'idha. Whether you were affected or not, that's a different thing. All my life I was preaching. But soon I will preach to you one more time, but not through my tongue. Rather, through my death, when my limbs are no longer moving, when my tongue is no longer moving, when my tongue is no longer uttering a word. أما قريب سيعظكم خفوت صوتي وسكون أطرافي فهي أبلغ للمتعظ من موعظة الواعظ البليغ. He says, my death and my serenity after death and my immobility after death will be more effective to you than the best articulated preaching. Because now you can see that this man who preached, who filled this world with action like Ali ibn Abi Talib, is no longer alive. This is a maw'idha by itself. This is a maw'idha. This is a great lesson. That no matter who you are, how powerful, how eloquent, how vivid, how animated you could be, in the end, you will vanish. You will go. You will not be here forever. Another preaching tool is the Quran itself, my dear brothers and sisters. Quran preaches to us. The Quran preaches to us. The Quran says, هذا بيان للناس وهدى وموعظة للمتقين. The Quran came to fulfill three purposes. One is to explain to people what religion is, bayan. Number two, wahudan, to be a guidance for the believers. And number three, وَمَوْعِظَةٌ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The Quran came to be preaching for the good believers. And the Quran does preach to us. When the Quran tells us, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. If I have revealed this Quran not to a human being, rather on the mountain, you will see the mountain humbling itself due to the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it comes to us as humans, sometimes we are heedless, we're oblivious of what the Quran means and how significant it is and how profound it is. When Musa alayhi salam was asked by his people, he took 70 people to the desert. And they asked Musa, tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a request. So what is your request? We want to see you. Physically we want to see you. قال رب أرني أنظر إليك. Of course, it wasn't his own request. It was a request by those ignorant people. They wanted to see Allah with their eyes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قال فانظر إلى الجبل فإن استقر مكانه فسوف تراني. Look at the mountain. If the mountain stands still, you will see me. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ جَعَلَهُ دَكًّا وَخَرَّ مُوسَى صَعِقًا. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appeared to the mountain, not physically, rather through his glory and might, the mountain was wiped out. Could not take it. Could not take that glory out of khushu' and humility. So immediately Musa fell down, prostrating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive his people for asking something like this. When you read these verses, فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ جَعَلَهُ دَكًّا وَخَرَّ مُوسَى صَعِقًا. When you read these verses, they send chill in your body. You feel the power of Quran. You feel the effectiveness of this book, that no human word can have this impact on anybody. This must be the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This must be a divine book, and that's why it brings awe to your heart. One of the صفات المؤمنين, the qualities of the good believers, وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا When you listen to the words of Allah, when they listen to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it keeps them closer to Allah and it increases their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the power of Quran. It is a powerful tool of preaching. My dear brothers and sisters, before I conclude, I would like to just